Well, I think of our problem more strategically than budgetary and tactical. It's not an accounting problem, waste and fraud and tinker here and cut a dollar here and dollar there. I think we have to decide what we want in our country, and I don't think we should be the policemen of the world. So we can go after the military budget. I don't even want to call it a defense budget because I don't think it provides defense. I want to cut the militarism that we pursue around the world, and that could cut hundreds of billions of dollars. I would go after the foreign stuff, and that's why I think the foreign policy is important. I think that we have a coalition of some Republicans and a lot of Democrats who think we spend too much money overseas and we shouldn't be expanding our wars. So that is a place where the American people should all join in. We're building an infrastructure in Afghanistan because we blew up Afghanistan and Iraq, and I think that's where we should really start to save. But what I'm concerned about is this is not dealing with the problem, and it's a problem I've talked about for a long time. Our deficits are huge, and we depend on monetizing this debt. And when you do that...
Explain that for people. They're just sort of trying to get into the conversation.
Okay, both Republicans and Democrats really are responsible for this huge deficit financing. So if only the market could buy that debt, interest rates would go up and the Congress would have to quit spending. But the Fed comes in and buys it and keeps interest rates low. But eventually that turns into price inflation, in which I think you've observed already today a tremendous amount. Gold soaring again today.
I mean, look at all soft commodities all day long.
Yeah, and now that is a tax on the people. Literally the people are paying, their standard of living is going to go down. And I'm also predicting, and I think we've seen signs of it, interest rates are going to go up. And so this will make the budgetary argument of a few billion dollars nothing compared to the calamity that we're facing. And it's no easy task to get this under control.
At the same time, you seem to be among the very few people, Republican or Democrat, who's willing to come in at least to a public theater like this one and engage in a conversation about the actual problem, which is the I don't know whether you want to call it inefficiency or corruption or manipulation, whether it's the tax code and the Swiss cheese there, the lack of real transparency and choice or competition in healthcare, the nature of our foreign policy, our banking system, our energy policy. These are the core issues that are laying the American people with debt. Why are there so few of you? Why is the debate not run by more people like you that are debating trillion-dollar issues that we actually have, as opposed to this pro wrestling we get with the nonsense on 30 billion from you or 50 billion from me?
Well, politically it's unpopular, especially if you'd been talking this way like I have for 10, 15 years when we should have been dealing with it. So this means you would have had to cut out the military-industrial complex and the special interests here at home. We have a system of corporatism. We don't have a system. Sometimes I don't like to condemn capitalism for the problems that we have today. But we have corporatism, and you know as well as anybody how the big guys got bailed out, and the little guys didn't get bailed out and compounded our problems. It wasn't the people who were giving us honest services and honest goods. It was the people who were ripping us off with the derivatives market, get into trouble, and then the taxpayers get stuck with that. That's what I resent.
Yeah, and they're still doing it.
Now, here's a guy who doesn't often backpedal, right or wrong. He's known for sticking with his positions. With me now is one of the Republicans who actually voted against Paul Ryan's plan, Texas Congressman Ron Paul. But this week, Congressman Paul announced he's setting up a presidential exploratory committee. So, Congressman Paul, why did you vote against the Ryan plan?
Well, it didn't cut anything. I mean, this noise that I just heard, this just is a representation of the bankruptcy of the country. And to blame Republicans is wrong. I think you have to blame both parties. Both parties have driven this country to bankruptcy. And just the noise and the screaming that you just released there is an indication of what's coming to our streets, because we won't admit what bankruptcy is. Sure, I'm concerned about people losing their medical care and all these problems, but believe me, the further bankruptcy of this country is going to be in everybody. The whole system is going to collapse, and that's what a dollar crisis is all about. So beware. This is only the beginning, and to say that one side is more guilty. Both sides have been spending too much. But the Democrats spend all this money on the welfare programs, and the Republicans spend all this money on warfare, and we're totally bankrupt. The dollar is crashing. There's inflation, and believe me, this is only the beginning. But if you don't understand why, why you're in trouble, we're in trouble. You're not helping us to figure it out, because there is an explanation to this. The middle class gets wiped out when you destroy the dollar, and that's what you're seeing. The middle class is getting wiped out, and the corporations are ripping you off, but you're misleading the people by saying that somebody is trying to cut.
No, look, the dollar's an interesting question, and you know your views on the Fed are very interesting. You got something really great done in auditing the Fed. You worked with Alan Grayson, and I'm giving you credit for that over and over. But look, that was not the issue here. You said people are angry about bankruptcy. No, those people were very specifically angry about the possibility of their Medicare being cut. And when you look at the national polls, no, hold on now. When you look at the national polls, people are very strident on this. You've got 76% saying that Medicare cuts are unacceptable. You've got 67% saying Medicaid unacceptable to cut. Social Security, 77% to cut. I mean, doesn't that show you that people are justifiably angry about this and they don't want to cut?
Oh, yeah, they are, but they have to understand why, and I think you're misleading them. I'm concerned, too, but it's going to get worse if we don't understand this. Now, my own personal opinion is that most of this stuff is all unconstitutional, all that, but that's not going to come about because we don't live in that age. But if we made common sense out of this, yes, I would cut all this militarism and not cut people off from medical care. But what's happening now is, since there will not be a consensus, there's an agreement in Washington. You vote for welfare, we vote for military. And it continues, and we keep printing this money. But the problem isn't that somebody getting something cut short on Medicare. It's the ending of it. It's the ending of the program. You have to understand, when the dollar goes, there's nothing left. There's runaway inflation. And now, this was the whole thing about the Bernanke hearings today. He admitted, you know, that there's inflation coming, and it's there, and there's not a lot he can do about it except print more money, and the dollar was further devalued. And that's the key issue.
I have massive issues with Ben Bernanke. I have massive issues with Tim Geithner, who are Republican leftovers from that the Obama administration, which is a Democratic administration, has taken on for reasons that no one can really fathom. So I agree with your points on that. But you're running for president, and you just said Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security are all unconstitutional. So if you become president, would you phase those programs out?
Well, you have to start where you are. I think it's all going to end, and it's not going to end because of me or anybody else. It's going to end because of the bankruptcy. So, but I have an idea of what we can do. I would cut massively on this overseas spending, hundreds of billions of dollars, and work our way out of it. But no, you can do this. I mean, when I go to the college campuses and I get large crowds out, I say, "But do you think you're going to get anything out of Medicare and Social Security?" They say, "No." I says, "I'd let you out. Just get out of the program, opt out.
So you would
restore your freedom, demand your rights to take care of yourself, and then take care of the elderly who are dependent. Don't put them out in the streets." And then you could do that, and you could work a transition. But there's a way you can have a transition.
So I just want to get clarity. Transition. So if you became president, you would transition completely out of Social Security and Medicare.
Well, you know, if I can get the people to agree and the Congress to agree, yeah, that would be my program, is to transition out, because this one has failed, and you're going to have riots in the streets. The food riots will come. They're all around the world, because this is a worldwide phenomenon. That's why the governments are breaking down around the world, because prices are going up. Because we have the reserve currency. Everything is based on the dollars. Other countries are already suffering, and it will come here. So you have to make a choice. You want to continue this and argue over where the cuts are coming, or are we going to get together and make some cuts? I'm just suggesting that the most popular way, political way, even though most Republicans disagree with me, is I would cut the military and the overseas spending and quit pretending we can run the world, because we can't. And then we could have a transition, and the young people know this. This is why I get support from the young people. They're willing to take care of themselves, and we don't have to throw anybody out in the streets, and we don't have to get rid of Medicare. But Medicare will be destroyed if the two sides don't get together and say, we got to get our house in order. You just can't spend your way out and borrow the money and print the money. That is total destruction to our whole system.
Congressman Ron Paul, I agree with you on militarism as well. That's why you're a very interesting person to have in the House of Representatives.
Every single day I read another story about the encroachment of the federal and state governments on our personal liberties, and I get sick and tired of it on what they're doing. And if you disagree with me on that, why don't you take a flight on an airplane? You might find out what it's like.
And that brings us to the topic today of airport security. Enough is enough. That's what Congressman Ron Paul is saying. And it's more and more what Americans are feeling about intrusive airport scans and gropes. Listen to Congressman Paul's impassioned plea on the floor of the House of Representatives.
What we're doing and what we're accepting and putting up with at this airport is so symbolic of us just not standing up and saying enough is enough. I know the American people are starting to wake up, but our government, those in charge, Congress as well as the executive branch, are doing nothing.
Congress as well as the executive branch are doing nothing, but America's foremost spokesman for liberty in the United States Congress, Texas Republican Congressman Dr. Ron Paul, joins us now. Dr. Paul, welcome back to Freedom Watch. It's always a pleasure. What can the government do? The public is in acute distress. The president has been virtually silent. The Congress, except for you, seems like it's still on vacation. What can we do?
Well, we should have done a lot less, a lot sooner. It would have been nice that they could have anticipated what it would be like if they created the TSA, where there were about 3 of us objected to that. But now, what do? Well, my suggestion is the first thing we should do is make sure there's no immunity for the people in the government doing things that are illegal for everybody else. And that's what my bill would do. That would be a step. But that's a long way off. How am I going to get the House to pass it, the Senate to pass it, and the president won't sign it? So that leaves it to the people. The people have to express themselves. And I'd have to say they're doing a pretty good job. And I would say not only the cables, but the Main Street media, give them credit. They're putting stuff out there, and they're showing the abuse. So it is waking up the American people. Sadly, it's slow. But I think we're making progress. I really think that people are getting annoyed. But I think a little bit of civil disobedience won't hurt. I mean, stand up to him and say, I've had this. He says, you can't make me do this, and see what happens. So I think opting out isn't the worst idea in the world.
Here's the problem as I see it. You know, a person can't fondle their neighbor when their neighbor comes onto their property. We don't have the right or the power to give that power to the government. How can the government do something that we can't do, that we never empowered the government to do it? As I'm discussing this with you, we're showing a film of a 6-year-old boy being stripped to his waist and touched by federal agents against the parent's will.
You know, and looking at this, and that's what motivated me the other day, was if this doesn't wake us up, what chance do we have to get them to bring our troops home and look at the Patriot Act and look at our foreign policy and do all the other things and look at the Fed? Those are big issues, too. But this one is in our face. If they can put up with it and say, oh, well, sacrificing a little bit of our freedom is necessary because we want to be safe. And you know the absurdity of that. If we want to be perfectly safe, we're going to have government cameras not only in our cars measuring everything we do and say, but in our houses, too. You know, we can prevent crimes in our houses. You know, every once in a while, kids get beaten and wives get beaten. So if we had a camera in the houses, we would prevent a lot of crime. So this goal of having perfect safety and that the government's responsible for it is a notion that has been growing too long. I hope we can use this episode with the TSA to show that that's not a responsibility of government. The responsibility of government is to protect our liberty.
Have you detected the view that you've just expressed amongst your fellow members of Congress? Because I wasn't kidding. We had John Mica on last week, a Republican who wrote the TSA Act 6 or 7 years ago, who said we never intended this and we have to take this power back. We've heard you. The president said, oh, I talked to Janet Napolitano, but she tells me this is the only thing we can do. Congressman, Congress would never have written this law because they could never confront their constituents. This is a rule written by nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Question, are other members of Congress as animated about this as you are?
Well, I think a few are, but that it remains to be seen. But I just don't think that the enthusiasm is there. The people who created the TSA, well, we didn't intend to do this. And like you say, it was done by regulators. But that's what happens all the time. Right. Do you think the Congress writes all the regulations of the IRS? Do they write them for the fish and wildlife and wetlands? But that's a derelicting duty by the Congress. And, you know, the executive branch is not to write laws. They shall write no laws. It's only the Congress. Right. So it's that whole principle that's allowed this total total out of control growth of the executive branch and judicial branch.